And welcome, everybody, to the Between Two Wheels podcast today. Hey, look, everything's happening. They're finally getting the big race of the year, the Tour de France coming up. And with that, we thought we would put out a great preview show talking about the riders, the teams, some of the route. We already did a route preview with Jonathan Scriven. Check that out. So on today's show, episode 190, we are bringing in Mike Sayers. You know him. You love him. He's a former World Tour pro. He's been with BMC. He's a coach. He's been with USA Cycling. He is the man behind the podcast, Interviews with the Gruppetto. Mike Sayers, welcome to the Between Two Wheels podcast. And as always, thank you. You're one of my favorites.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love being here. Every time I'm here, I love being here.
Good. Well, hopefully we have another love fest going on today. So let's talk about the Tour de France. First of all, just let's throw some things out there. Very compact season so far. Obviously, it's been pretty exciting. Few things. You were going to be working with the Olympic team. Obviously, the Olympics got put back. What's your status right now with USA Cycling and that whole thing? And then what's been your take on the season thus far, the post-lockdown?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, I got laid off very early in the COVID process, and then most of the coaches after me kind of have been laid off. So USA Cycling's kind of at a really skeleton crew last night, up to this point. And in all honesty, I can't tell you where it stands. There's just a lot of I don't know right now, which is the same for you and for me and for most of the people out there in their everyday lives. Is we're just not really clear on what's happening. So for right now, I don't have a real good answer on what's going to happen with USA Cycling's Devo programs and their national team programs. Those are questions for some of the upper management, and really the only people officially working at USA Cycling right now, as far as I understand it, are upper management. So the athletic department went from something like 30 people to 4. There's literally like 4 people working, and those are upper management people. So for right now, we're just on hold, and it's disappointing, especially I think most for the juniors. Right. Mainly I was with the under 23s and the elites, and those guys generally can take care of themselves, or their teams can take care of them. Although I'm sure there's some holes left by USA Cycling not being there for sure, but it really, really hurts the junior and the women's programs the most. I think that's really my personal opinion.
Oh, that would make sense. So what's the process for? I mean, they announced the Olympic team. Is there going to be any reshuffling? Because it's obviously pushed off till 2021, and I'm assuming you'll at some point get rehired back for that. But is there going to be any reshuffling, or is the teams already set for that?
That's a really good question, and I think that's a little bit of an unknown because I don't take care of that part of it. The selection process is done by Jeff Pierce and Jim Miller, and so I think. From the women's side, I'm pretty sure, well, first of all, the long team is picked. So because of the rules governing WADA, World Anti-Doping, and USOC and IOC, the long team that they released is basically that's it. Those are the athletes that will be chosen. There's probably a few athletes that are not very happy with that selection, and they may be, I want to stress may be, pursuing legal action. Again, that's not my department. But that's their freedom to do that. And I think as I understand it, that might be happening on both the men's and the women's side. So that may change the long team, but no one is going to come from outside of that long team and work their way in at this point. It's that part of it is a done deal.
Gotcha. And the little deviation, because I heard, and I was interested in this question because kind of the resurgent or the new American on the scenes right now has been Sepp Kuss. And I wasn't sure what the status was for him. And I think you're only taking a few, elite riders, and they're also doing the time trial. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Sepp was actually in the select. He was in the long team selection. There's actually 1 or 2 other riders that have had really good results in this condensed season that are probably a little more frustrated with the process at this point. Although when the long team was selected, you would have probably never known that. You may have, but there's no guarantee. But for example, like Quinn Simmons was left off in today. As of today, he was top 10 at the Tour of Britannia stage 1 today, which I will tell you, that area is one of my favorite areas in all of the world, especially for cycling. And those stages, especially around, in and around Plouay or that Britannia area, are really quite difficult. And for him to be top 10 today really says something.
Yeah, it's very impressive. First of all, let's talk about the route. So my friend Jonathan and I had already gone through the route in detail, stage by stage. You've obviously got a different perspective than what we would have. So why don't you give us an overview of what you think about the route that was produced for the 2020 Tour de France? Obviously the highlights, no Alpe d'Huez, no Ventoux, no time trials, no team time trials set for the last one-day individual time trial up La Planche de Belfi. Out in Pinot's hometown. Suspicious.
Yeah.
My take is always that the route is produced to try to give some French rider the benefit of anything, and maybe trying to Ineos, Sky, Lance proof it as much as possible. And it's always difficult to do that against a great rider. So what's your take on the route and some of the highlights that you see out there?
Well, clearly missing a team time trial and regular, some more regular type traditional time trials is really going to hurt some riders. I think that they did design the course more towards, let's say, Alaphilippe. We'll just kind of insert that. You know, some people may say Pinot, but actually Pinot is like, I mean, he's actually riding quite well right now. So, I mean, I think that it hurts. I actually think lack of time trials this year hurts quite a few guys and quite a few teams. Some are going to be better than others, but even what we'll probably end up talking about right now, the team that's in kind of pole position, the Jumbo Visma guys. I mean, if they had more time trials, the Tour would actually favor those guys.
Of course.
because they have Dumoulin, they have they have Sepp, who actually time trials really well. They have Roglic probably at this point. They have Gesink, they have Tony Martin. I mean, they're loaded. They're absolutely loaded with time trial guys. So no time trials is going to be, I guess, kind of a disappointment. But because I actually lived in Nice when I was working at BMC and I was riding there. So if you look at how the route actually kind of, it almost does like a double Alps dip in a way, because they hit those most southern Alps, which they don't hit a lot in the beginning of the race. So there's going to be some definitive stages right off. And then they never really go to the north. They never go to Bretagne, which is really, really disappointing, because that's like the most cycling mecca place in all of France. But I think then Bretagne makes up for it because they have their own race this week, which is dedicated to the World Tour guys. Anyway, I think that lack of time trials is really going to change. And then you and I were just speaking off camera about this new climb, the Col de Loze. The Col de Loze was, I've had the pleasure, air quotes, pleasure of driving, not riding. Actually, I did ride it. Up that with the Tour de Avenir last year, where they did a time trial from the very bottom of the climb, which is actually the bottom of the climb that goes up to Mirabel, and then you veer off the road to Mirabel, and then you get on this Col de Loze. And the Col de Loze, we can talk about this, but essentially the last 6K is a bike path. And like a lot of people say bike path, but no, this is like a legit bike path. And in fact, when we did it with Avenir, the Belgian national team car stalled out on the climb because the climb was too steep, and you're at altitude, and it completely stopped the race. Like, it stopped the entire caravan, and we actually never really we got to see the finish, but barely. Anyway, so the Col de Loze is gonna it could literally turn the Tour upside down, and I'm not gonna even say that lightly. It could turn the Tour upside down in the last kilometer of this climb. You can see the top of the climb almost from the last like 5K. And in the last kilometer, this climb is so steep that a guy could lose a minute. If somebody blows in the last kilometer, they could lose a minute in the last kilometer, no problem.
And that's up to 2,300 meters. So that might be the highest point in the Tour this year. Just looking, I'm not quite sure.
I think it's close. I think it's going to be very, very close to the highest point in the Tour. It's one of the highest points in all of continental Europe. And it is, so what they've done is they built this bike path that goes over the pass to Mirabel, the ski resort, and goes down to the other ski resort, which is on the other side. And then there's a road that circles back halfway up the mountain. It's a regular road, regular driving road. And it goes to like the midway point on Mirabel again. So they've created this kind of touristy loop that you can do. And in Mirabel, they rent these electric mountain bikes. So that's the only way most people can get up this climb. It's absolutely phenomenal, this climb.
All right, that is awesome. So we'll be looking for that. That's stage 17. I just was putting up the profile as we were talking there. Stage 17 up to Mirabel, and I think they do the Madeleine that same day. So that'll be
my God,
that'll be prior to that. So that'll be quite the involved stage there. So what's your impression of the race in general then, as far as the route goes, before we hit any teams?
Well, I think this is, I'm going to tell you that I have maybe enjoyed this cycling season with all of its hiccups more than any season, because every day there's bike racing every day. Right. And it's kind of like the NBA right now in the bubble, where it feels like a final, it feels like an NCAA Final Four kind of a feel, where it's like every day there's games and you've got guys like knocking down winning shots with no time left. And you as a fan, and that's what I would quantify myself as right now, is as a fan, it's absolutely incredible to watch bike racing every day. I think you're seeing, before the season started, I said, listen, this season is going to be fraught with sickness, injuries, and then possibly a COVID elimination because of the way the rules are.
Right.
And we've seen that. We've seen riders go down and they don't have enough time to recover. And then maybe they're going to do the tour. Maybe they're not going to do the tour. Someone else might have to come in at the last minute. So there's a lot of, for you and for me, it's a lot of excitement. For the teams and for the riders, it's a lot of stress. So I think a lot of riders are going to go into the tour already under some kind of stress, which is not what you want. And then that stress is going to be twofold, because some of the early stages are going to be very decisive. And then after that, it's just the stress of racing 3 weeks, which none of these guys have raced 3 weeks in more than a year. So yeah. It's just, we could see some very, very high drama in this tour, maybe some of the highest drama we've ever seen in a Tour de France.
And then they've done, like you said, they don't have the time trial, so that's going to compact it a little bit. I do like how the climbing right away and I say I like, but I think it's maybe better for some of the big wigs, where you're going to eliminate some of these early riders right away because they just don't have the legs in them. And then what you do is you don't see them pushing at the start of a climb or being up there for the sprint finishes, the GC guys, which often is more dangerous. So it's already dangerous enough. So there's that kind of aspect of it as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're going to see a lot of really interesting dynamics over this Tour de France. And I would venture to say this might be last year we had a South American winner for the first time in Egan Bernal. But this tour is really wide open to see a domination of South American riders, because Ineos, as we have seen over the last 4 or 5 days, they have loaded up on South American riders, or at least riders whose Spanish is their first language. And then you have some riders, for example, from EF Education, who have a good South American contingency. And then you have a team like Jumbo Visma that has riders from all different nationalities. You've got Slovenians and Dutch guys and Danish guys, a German guy, another Danish guy, an American guy in Sepp. So there's really, this might be one of the, almost a throwback to the 80s and the Café de Colombia time. But more than anything, you're just going to see a wide range of nationalities performing in the tour this year at a really, really high level, I think.
Yeah, let's go to some of the teams. Great observation about the Café de Colombia. That was one of I always loved seeing those riders. Fabio Parra, and he was with Kelme, just the little Wilcho Herrera, Pablo Wilches, or whatever those guys were. Fantastic riders. And, the Americans, we had US, we had Raul Alcala for a while there, riding for 7-Eleven, which was pretty fantastic as well. Let's go to some of the teams. Who do you see as the biggest threat teams here? And obviously we know that the two big ones, but let's go walk through some of these other teams. And just from the start, we'll just kind of walk through them and maybe give me your top teams to watch for this year. And then we go and start breaking down by different categories, the GC guys and the sprinters.
Okay, so my number one team is Jumbo-Visma because they have so many cards to play. Even if they lose Roglic for the Tour, which I think right now is 50-50 because of his injuries, even if he's out, I still think they're the strongest team and they have the most cards to play. And the thing that people have to remember about Jumbo-Visma is that team is a reincarnation of the Rabobank program.
Right.
Rabobank probably got rid of more good riders than they ever kept. So what I mean by that is that organization with those directors, that most of those directors are they were built internally through that team. These guys know how to win big races. And I still will stand by the fact that the Dutch cycling system is probably the best in the world if you look at it from top to bottom, from participation to elite level racing. So Jumbo-Visma is my number one team. I think Ineos is very close. I think they made a very brave statement in leaving out their two, what would have been called like two of their best riders on paper, but clearly Thomas and Froome were not up to the level up to this point, which goes back to our statement of what this cycling season has been all about. You guys have been exposed very early, and there was no time off, no time for them to like try to get it together. So their downward spiral, or at least non-upward spiral, was very evident. And I think that was a brave decision on Ineos's part, but the right decision, quite frankly.
Before we go, two quick things on those two teams. So one is Stephen Corey's what gets put out, and obviously third place last year. He's been podiuming in the Giro. Quite the very good rider and probably good support, if not some sort of a decoy for Jumbo. He's out, and it looks like they threw Bennett in, but they also got Janssen, Armand, Grondal. So they put a bigger guy in there. What do you think about the fact that they because you may need a bigger guy kind of helping you control when you have a team like that you're likely going to be in the yellow jersey at some time. What do you think of that decision to kind of not bring like a toll hook as an example, another climber?
No, I think that was a smart decision. I think Grondal that guy is all the Danish guys are just beasts. Norwegians, Danish guys are just beasts. So I think bringing him in to help Tony Martin control the early stages is a really good move. And if George Bennett, if George Bennett was not in that roster before, his results up to this point should have put him in anyway.
Right. But sometimes they're like, hey, we maybe just put him in the Giro, or but they're throwing everything. The Tour is the be all end all, obviously.
Yeah, the Tour is everything for them. And I think they've gone all in. And I think they needed to put Bennett in there anyway because of how well he's riding. And listen, at the end of the day, if these guys decide to put all their cards on the table and play hardball and start putting guys in breakaways, it's over, because you can't chase a guy like Bennett all day and then have Dumoulin go and then have to chase him. Like, there's just not enough horsepower in the peloton to do that. So all I got to say is I still, even if Roglic is out, my money is still on Jumbo-Visma to come through with the goods.
Now, what about Ineos losing out with Thomas and Froome only for the point of leadership? And I don't think Thomas was ever really going to challenge this year. I got the feeling he's like, hey, I got my one. I know where my place is, and he would have been a fantastic road captain, what have you. They don't have Luke Rowe, so they do have Luke Rowe. They who was the other rider that was always big up there in the climbing for them that they got rid of? They had Wout Poels. That's who.
Yeah, he moved teams. Wout Poels went to the Bahrain McLaren team. They do have one young rider, Pavel Sivakov, who came up through the BMC under 23 system, but he is a pure climber. Like, he's a pure Russian climber. So I think their leadership is going to come from Kwiatkowski, who has always been a leader on that team and very clearly has decided that he's going to be a support rider probably going forward. And I think for him, that's a brave and very smart move. They have Van Barle up there. They have Sivakov in the mountains. Castro Viejo is a beast on the flats. And listen, Carapaz won the Giro last year in a team that was fraught when he was a movie star, that was fraught with problems. He's now on a team that has full support. He's already won one impressive stage of the Dauphiné this year. So and then you have Amador there also. So Bernal has, for lack of a better term, he has this kind of South American mafia, which I think for him is actually really, really good. Okay. He has some support there. They have Kwiatkowski as a leader, Rowe to kind of lead in the earlier part of the stages with Castro Viejo, and then Van Barle, Sivakov, Carapaz, probably Amador, and Bernal in the mountains. That's still a lot of guys in the mountains. And I still am of the mind, quite frankly, that Bernal is the best pure climber in the bike race.
So you don't see a conflict with he and Carapaz as an example. I mean, personally, I don't see Carapaz he was slaughtered for the Giro, I think, early on. So I just don't think he's quite to the form he needs to be, but you don't see any kind of
no, because I think that team Ineos is run with a real strong hand. And I don't believe that Movistar is run with as strong of a hand. The problem with Movistar, the problem with Movistar is, for good or for bad, you have Valverde there. Right. So when Valverde is there, everything is for him. I don't care what anybody says. Until he retires, it's all about Valverde. So, that's a problem when you have a guy that's maybe not at his best anymore, where everybody is looking at him to leadership or do whatever. And Valverde just has never been a guy that's going to go out there and sacrifice for somebody else. So with Carapaz going to Ineos, it's a better scenario for him. It's a way better scenario for him.
Okay. We'll just go through these here. Bora Hansgrohe, they don't really have anybody for GC. Schachmann got injured. I guess he made the team anyway. But they had Leonard Kamna. Some of these guys can climb. Grossschartner, Bachmann.
Bookman is their guy. Bachmann is their guy.
He got hurt, and I'm kind of surprised to see that he made it back. So good for him. Yeah. But I'm looking at, top 10, maybe an agitator of top 5 for that team.
Yeah, I would probably I think Leonard Kamna is going to surprise some people. Very young guy, very young rider. But I think you're looking at Bookman probably for a top 5 GC. And Kamna, maybe top 15, maybe top 10 if he catches lightning in a bottle. Mollberger will be floating around there. And then, of course, we have Peter for the end. But the great thing about having a guy like Peter for some of the harder stage, the sprinter stage, maybe not pure sprinter stages, but the transition stages, is he doesn't need a lead out. And that takes a lot of pressure off your team when you have a sprinter like that doesn't need a lead out.
Right. And prime example, Team Jumbo, and I'm getting clogged up here on these 3, but Team Jumbo-Visma decided early on, they announced their team back in December, I think, no Groenewegen. They're like, hey, not going to happen, even though, he can win the stages. So good point there. AG2R, and what do you think of their team? I mean, they've got Roman Bardet as their main thing, and then it's just a bunch of kind of climber guys. So what do you think of there?
Yeah, so I think what's going to happen with AG2R is, if you look at the moves that AG2R has been doing over this transition period, I believe AG2R, which is one of my favorite teams, and probably I'm the only guy in the world that thinks their kid is the nicest kid in the peloton. But
which one?
The AG2R. I love their kid.
Oh, their kid. Gotcha. Yeah, I said it was their kid, and I'm like, oh, they're all like kids.
No,
okay.
No.
I do not dislike it. How's that?
I think that they're in a transition. I think AG2R is transitioning to a little more of a classics team based on what some of the moves that they made, but they're going to do what every French team is going to do at the Tour de France. They're going to go for stage wins. They're going to try to get one guy in the top 10. And you're going to see them I think you're going to see them really, really active, because part of this goes very near where their headquarters is in Grenoble. And they're just going to do what they always do, which is they're going to be very active during the stages. They'll probably get a couple stage wins out of it. But I think overall, I think that team is looking as a transition to a very new program in 2021.
Well, yeah, you saw some of Bardet's leaving and some of the other people that are coming on. We might take all day if we go through every team, but there's still some of these I want to talk about. DeQuani Quickstep, you had mentioned Alaphilippe, maybe it being designed for him. He's had no indications, at least that I've seen in the news, that he's interested in this as the overall. So, but then he said that all last tour as well.
Yeah, I think he's very interested in this. I think he's extremely interested in this, especially with no time trial. But he's not going to have any support in the mountains. And if something happens and he does get the jersey, he's going to have his team is going to be able to defend for a while. But then at some point, they're going to run out of firepower in the mountains.
I mean, maybe Jungles could help, but they didn't bring like James Knox or some of these other guys that at least can go uphill. I mean, Asgreen can go up-ish, but he's not. You're right.
Yeah, but they have Sam Bennett and they have Morkov there. So they're going to go for sprint stages because they have their best sprinter with their best lead out guy.
Groupama FDJ.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. You've got Pinot, who is very clearly on good form. This team, I think, has made a dedicated effort to try to win the Tour de France. They were very clearly they would have been on the podium last year if not for some very, very bad luck. You've got Reichenbach, who is actually riding better than he has ridden in several years. I called him as one of my dark horses 3 or 4 years ago, and he's a little bit on better form right now. So I would look for him to be up there on those mountain stages where it's like down to 10 or 15 guys. He's going to probably still be there to help Pinot. They've got David Gaudu won Tour de Avenir. He's a very, very good climber. So I believe this might be his first Tour de France. So he's going to be up there on the stages. So I look for FDJ to make some serious waves in the mountains, and they're run by Mark Matteo. Mark Matteo does not hide his cards. I mean, this guy he's going to want his guys going full gas every single day to try to stir the pot and make something happen.
Gaudu was not at Dauphiné, and I don't know if Reichenbach was either, because they sure didn't show that they can defend like the last day there. I mean, Pinot was all by himself, looking a little frantic. So my point is this Tour de France team at least looks better than what you saw on the pre-up for the tour. So
yeah, so Reichenbach is Swiss champ, so he has the Swiss champ. He has Swiss champ clothing on. He doesn't have normal clothing. So sometimes sometimes I think people think that he rides for Cofidis.
Yeah, but that makes sense. And no, because Cofidis doesn't get results.
Which we should talk about Cofidis.
Let's do, because you're right. Guillaume Martin is a rider that's been slowly and steadily coming up. And this year he did pretty good on the Ventoux little tour, pre-tour one-day race, and then obviously at the Dauphiné as well. Yeah,
and I think Cofidis is going to do what they always do, which is they're gonna go for a lot of stage wins. They have, Harada has actually been riding pretty well, and Cofidis is another team that is on an overhaul. They're on a complete team overhaul within that program. They've come a long way in a year. The question for me is going to be if Viviani is going to have the form to get up there in the sprints, because up to this point, we have not seen a lot of Viviani since the restart, and that concerns me. The team that we didn't talk about for GC, which we should have been talking about, was Astana.
Well, let's do it.
Okay, so Astana, again, another team loaded with Spanish-speaking riders. I think Lopez is going to have something to say. I think you've got the Izagirre brothers there, which I think those guys are really dangerous. And then you have the revelation in Lushenko, who is also going to be very, very dangerous. And then they've got this Colombian rider, Tejeda, who was a very good under-23 rider. So I think they're not – I don't foresee Astana taking the reins and like trying to go out and get the lead and then hold it to the very end. I see them making it very, very difficult on whatever team has the jersey, and then possibly working their way into a jersey over time in the big mountain stages.
Interesting few little things. I think Sanchez just won the Spanish national championships.
He did. That is correct.
And Lusenko, who won the Tour of La Provence, was that it? Where they ended up Ventoux. He really put it to everyone up there. Well, he didn't win. Nairo did, but he won. I think that overall, quite impressive. Or maybe Nairo did. Point is, he was riding really impressive. I'm kind of wondering they didn't bring Vlasov, who's kind of come on all of a sudden. Maybe he's too young for Astana.
Well, there's no
Fulsang even for them.
Right. Fulsang, I don't think ever really had a plan to do it, but these preliminary lists are just that. They're preliminary. We haven't seen the final start list. There's no guarantee that Vlasov will not be there with the way he's been riding. Man, we'll see what happens. Do you
think though that these lists are more apt to be correct because of COVID, where they're has an example, Hugo Hule, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he's a Canadian rider. He had tested positive. He thought he's out, but then it came back as a negative test, so he's cleared to go. And that is, oh my God, that is the biggest going to be I think the biggest thing in the Tour this year. Are they going to actually hold to that rule because you're getting so many negative recently? Not a negative test coming back, and that sucked to have your whole team exit. And then find out, oh, sorry, it wasn't right.
Right. It's going to be very difficult. And I think they are going to hold to it unless literally, unless it's like a rider like Pinot, and then maybe not. Maybe not.
That is, and I just keep coming back to the Tour of California a few years ago where, TJ Van Garderen has the mishap out through Morgan Hill, whatever it was. And he's out 5K from the finish, but they said, we're good. And it's just, things, that one worked out fine in overall anyway. Okay. Bahrain, we should talk about them real quick because Landa obviously is there. He, like you said, he has Wout Poels with him. They're bringing Sonny Cabrelli. So, let's just assume these lists are correct. So they still brought their sprinters. So there's not a full on climbing support team.
Yeah. So I think you got a lot of guys that are possible stage winners here. You've got Bilbao, you've got Caruso, Cabrelli, Landa, Morich, Poels. Those guys all have a history of winning big stages. I don't think Landa can go for the podium. I just don't think he's quite good enough. So you have guys like Morich, though, that could win more than one stage. You guys, right. Landa, Landa could win a stage if he's in the top 10, but not really a threat. So you have Poels who could do the same thing, win a stage if he's not really a threat. So My feeling is that Bahrain is going to go and just try to win stages. I think that's what their team is built for.
Maybe they're thinking that Landa always has a support of a team and it goes awry. So why bring support this time and see if it works out? A quick thing, there's always the conflict that he had with his team, but I was just thinking back to, we were talking about Astana and Lopez, a really good rider in the third week. He's always been really done well, Vuelta, Giro in the third week. So we'll see, that team, maybe they'll be able to support him and he come on. So Movistar and maybe UAE as two other GC teams.
Yeah, so Movistar has just not done that much this year. I gotta say, they went through an overhaul in their team this year, and Enrico Mas he was the one that was supposed to show up and be the leader, but I don't think he has the form right now, and I actually think they're kind of in trouble. I just don't see anybody there other than the traditional Valverde who's going to be able to contend for sure for GC, and they may actually have problems winning stages.
Well, but they do the team GC thing, so we'll see how that works out for them. No, you're so right. And what's been different this year is the Dauphiné and all these lead up races to the Tour. They're closer to the Tour, so typically you have the Dauphiné 4 weeks out maybe, and so you're like, okay, well, he's not quite on top level, but give him a month and he'll probably be just right on form. You can't really say that right now when Valverde is getting kicked out. There was it Burgos, one of those where he was second place over the top of the climb for a finish. You're like, oh, the old man's back at it. But other than that, it hasn't really been much.
Yeah, he hasn't done much since then. So I don't. And then with UAE, again, you have Pogacar, and he's got some support in the mountains, although Aru has not really shown up this year. Formolo has been off the chain, as we've seen. So again, I think you have a lot of guys there that can win stages. As much as I like Alexander Kristoff, I knew him as his first 2 years at BMC. I was a director there. As much as I like Alex, I just don't think he has it anymore to win sprint stages. So I don't know. I see Pogacar probably on the podium, and outside of that, I don't see a lot happening for them.
Okay, we do have to mention a few other ones here. EF Education First, Pro Cycling, and Mitchelton Scott.
Okay, so EF, I think really interesting team. First of all, we have Nielsen Palace, who's from here in Sacramento, Roseville right. to be exact. First Tour de France. He actually texted me this morning that he's on his way to Nice, or he's in Nice right now, so he's pretty pumped. They've got Higuita and they've got Uran, definitely, and Martinez.
Right.
So definitely guys are going to say something in the final. So I definitely see them, at least one of their Colombian guys, in the top 5 GC. And I see at least one stage win from those guys.
I mean, I'm looking at this team and I'm like, if everyone is on, but I mean, they haven't been, because TJ hasn't been anywhere. I haven't really seen Nelson even racing before this. Hugh I mean, you look at this and you go, Hugh Carthy, I mean, what was he, 10th in the Giro? He does well. Higuita, Kukler, Alberto Bettiol. I mean, that kind of is a great team, what you would expect. The one that's kind of a surprise that I heard today, well, you can see here, Mike Woods left off. What do you think of that? And is that due to him leaving next year?
Yeah, I think so. And that's really disappointing, because I think especially this year more than any year, I think if you're going to play that game as a team manager, that's really difficult. Because, I mean, guys are just they're looking for opportunities, and I don't know. I don't agree with leaving Woods off this list. The guy has clearly proven that he's back to full strength after his crash last year, and I mean, he deserves to be there. But maybe he'll get more opportunities at the Giro or the Vuelta, and maybe at the end of the day it'll work out better for him.
Right. I mean, I'd like to see TJ there, but I almost think Woods would be the person to slot in for him instead. Any other teams that you're looking at for like strong GC teams? I mean, some of these.
Well, I think you gotta look a little bit at Trek Segafredo. I mean, I'm not gonna say. I mean, listen, I don't think Richie Porte can win the Tour anymore. I'm not even totally convinced that he can be in the top 5. But what you have is you have Baca Momola, you have Porte, and you have Elizon. So you have 3 guys that can ride in the mountains. You've got Toons, Stuyven, and the Danish guy, I believe, and even Toms, who can ride, and Mads. So you have like 4 guys that can win in the transition stages. So again, with Trek Segafredo, I'm looking 1, maybe 2 stage wins, and probably Porte or Mollema top 10 GC, if not both. So for them, I think that's a pretty successful Tour de France, quite frankly.
Right. I totally agree. I think you can see both of those, or one of those guys, pop in the top 5, because you've seen so far this year, both of them have been riding. Porte especially has been more consistent than a lot of guys on the board for some of these races. He's been able to stay up there fine, and Baca didn't do too bad at Lombardia, so same for him. All right, let's take any other teams you're missing as far as just like big teams we expect, like for GC teams, right? We'll talk about GC riders in general, but any of the other teams that just throw anything out at you that, I mean, NTT, we don't really see much of them anymore. No. Sunweb, Matthews just won today, so he's on form at least, but I don't see that they have anybody for overall.
No GC riders. They usually have a really young team, and they have some sprinters in there, so I don't see much from them. B&B Hotels, I mean, they're going to be like the reincarnated Cofidis. They're going to be in the breakaway every day, and then Coquillard will try to make his way at the finish and try to get a stage win in the sprint stages.
And you may see Pierre Roland taking some long shot attempts in the mountains. So
yeah, probably that'll probably happen. I mean, again, I think B&B Hotels is going to roll that dice of, they just want to be on TV a whole bunch. And I think you're going to see them on TV a whole bunch.
All right, let's talk about sprinters.
Okay.
And kind of the ones, I just pulling this off of cycling, pro cycling stats. I mean, it ranks them here. So this doesn't necessarily mean this is the be all end all top sprinters, but we can at least take a look. Did you see many sprint stages? I mean, I'm looking at obviously Paris, but maybe, and there's another one in there that's like Pan Flat. But other than that, there's maybe 2 or maybe 4, maybe 5 sprint stages at the most.
Yeah,
At least that's
not much for sure. Not much for those guys to choose from. So I think what you're going to have is I think this is going to continue the trend that we're seeing in 2020, which is you're going to see a lot of guys taking a lot of risk, and you're going to see, I hate to say it, but I think you're going to see possibly some horrific crashes, because I just think a lot of guys are going to have to put it all out there. They're not going to have the teams to support them. The sprinters, most of these sprinters are going to have maybe one lead out guy. And then you're going to have these guys that are going to kind of come from nowhere. Like, Team Sunweb, for example, like they have Bull C's Bull. Sorry, my bad. I mean, he's huge. That guy's huge. He's like 6'3". They have these guys. These guys are going to have to get something out of this tour. So I think you're going to see a lot of risk taking at the end of the sprint stages.
So Groenewegen not here. Is Gaviria in the tour?
No, I don't believe Gaviria is here either. No,
he's not there. Cavendish didn't make the team, which is no surprise, but just one less kind of big name going at him. Top ones we're listing here, and then we'll just kind of look. Maybe we talk about this. We just talked about the teams, but let's talk about the support for each one of them. Sam Bennett. He's won some already this year. He's looked pretty good. DeQuinty Quickstep. I mean, they always support their riders. And as we mentioned, maybe not the best team for Alaphilippe. So you're looking at Sam Bennett as maybe the best bet for multiple wins, if possible.
He's got the best lead out. So he's got Morkov, he's got Jungles, Morkov, and Asgreen at the very least. Probably you're going to also enter Stibar in that lead out, and probably De Klerk. And probably Devians. I mean, he literally could have 5 lead out guys. He could have 5 lead out guys in the last 5K, which if he has that, there's a really good chance he could win multiple stages.
Right, because he's no slouch at getting in the right position, pushing himself around. He has no problem with that. And you don't see DeQuinty Quickstep having like any conflict. They know who their guy is, and Sam Bennett knows how to stay on. Giacomo Nizzolo, he just won the Italian road championship, so he's coming up for him. I think he won a stage earlier this year as well. I don't know that NTT has a team to support him on this, but a lot of times it's like you have that one big train and everyone else tries to jump on board.
Yeah, he has 1 or 2 guys. Like he's going to have, Bosenhagen, and he's going to have Gogol maybe. And then I think that's a Volgren, not, maybe for a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, he falls in this category of Nizzolo falls in this category of like Saigon, where he's just going to be looking out for himself. And he's going to be jumping trains and trying to get himself in there. I think the same is going to happen at Middleton Scott, because, they have like a couple guys in there that can sprint kind of okay. You have a guy like Daryl Impey, which if all the sprinters get dropped, he's probably the fastest guy. He's probably the next fastest guy. So, and then Israel Nation actually has some guys that are in there pretty fast. So they got Hofstetter, who's a very good sprinter when it goes uphill. Like if it's a really difficult sprint, they've got
Van Asbrook.
Yeah, Van Asbrook, he's probably their fastest guy. So, you've got 1 or 2 guys in there that are going to be looking for wheels. And then with Lotto Soudal, who up until like 3 days ago, I wasn't even sure that they were racing this year. I was like, are those guys even racing?
They were doing the EF thing where they're like, wait until the protocols are all good here.
Yeah, but you've got Caleb in there. But, Caleb is going to have like Degenkolb and maybe, that's about it. And he really, Caleb kind of needs a lead out. So I don't know. I don't really know what Lotto Soudal is going to really do. Caleb could certainly, he's really, really small guy. So if he gets the right wheel, he certainly could come around. But they just, I don't know, man. They've just been a really unimpressive team this year. It's been really disappointing.
I agree. I will say though about Caleb, watching him, there were times where he has a perfect lead out and it works for him, and other times where he needs one guy to get him on the train of the right spot. And when he's committed and he's in that spot, he's full gung, and you got to watch for him. So like you said though, not many chances. Talked about Sagan was there, Ilya Viviani. We don't really know what's going on with him. There was one other person that I saw with Mitchelton Scott was Luka Mezgik. That might be their guy. And then you have, since there's so many of these stages that look they're not quite sprinters, Wout Poels, Sagan, Daryl Impey, Michael Matthews, who's the gold medalist guy that your buddy, Ben Avermaet. I mean, these are some of the other guys kind of, and let's talk about that then. So you have this, and if there's not a lot of big sprinting stages, the green jersey might be going to someone else. Is Wout even going to think about that? Or do you think it's back up to Sagan and maybe Matthews type this year?
Yeah. I mean, the way that guy is riding right now, I could see him just kind of like not falling into it. But the guy's riding tempo at the end of giant mountain stages. I mean, Sagan, if Sagan really wants to get it back, he's going to have to go in some breakaways, and he's going to try to have to steal some points. But the problem is that, like, it just depends on where Lotto Visma is, because if Jumbo Visma is up there and they have the GC, then clearly they won't let Van Aert go up the road. But if they don't have the jersey, then he can match Sagan move for move and basically beat him in the sprint. And trust me, man, I'm a huge Sagan fan. I don't say that lightly. But at the end of the day, I mean, Sagan has gotten to this point where there's other guys out there that can do the same thing that he can do, and maybe even a little bit better right now. So it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to go to somebody that's not going to be a pure sprinter for sure, because I actually think that the green jersey has been less about a sprinter's jersey, and it's more about guys that are just more well-rounded than just being just flat out fast.
Oh, completely. And I mean, that's why Peter Sagan has been winning this. What about his season so far this year, though? We haven't seen him really touch the front.
Very strange season. I mean, I'm not totally sure, but I think his contract is up at the end of this year. And I think that those guys have some really tough decisions to make, because, I mean, listen, the guy's a 3-time world champ. You have to pay that guy. I don't care how old he is. So at the end of the day, like, I don't know if they're going to have the money to pay him and then build their team to be something different. So I think they're going to have a very tough decision at the end of the year. And I think for him, I think he's just, I mean, almost any team at this point would take that guy. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that team this year, because at the Tour, at least, because, maybe he's going to use the Tour to get into shape and then go to the Giro and go to the Vuelta and try to do something there. But it's hard to say. And then, of course, we have the team we didn't really talk about with CCC.
Yeah. In
my opinion, quite frankly, I think those guys are all riding to find jobs somewhere else. So
yeah, that's kind of sad in a way.
It is very sad in a way. It's not a good situation.
No.
So, I mean, they don't really have leadership there. They don't have a GC guy. It's like, I don't really know what they're going to do, quite frankly.
Right. So let's go to maybe the top GC competitors here. Okay. And with that, there's also, there's a few competitions, right? There's Young Rider, and that's probably going to be a breakdown between Pogacar, Bernal, depending on which one kind of is the more stellar. It's got to be tough, right? Your Pogacar, maybe you're hoping for a top 5. It'd normally get you the white. I think that happened to TJ a few years ago.
Yep.
But Bernal, he's going to end up with the top of his spot as well. What do you think about with the KO, the climbers jersey, the KOM? I mean, it's kind of the polka dot. And I don't mean like who's your pick. It's like, I used to love seeing that when I was younger. It's like the super climbers, but it seems like lately it's not been just as much the super climber. And do you care about this jersey? Is it something important to the riders? Do you know?
No, I think it's really important. I mean, I think it's the best looking jersey in the peloton, me personally, especially when they have like the whole kit rolling. I think it looks really good, but I don't know. I think that competition is going to be wide open, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to have some very early decisive stages, like mountain stages very early on, which are going to seed that competition very quickly. So it's going to be hard, because I think there's going to be GC guys that are going to end up with that jersey just kind of by default. And then at some point along the line, those guys are going to decide, okay, well, I can't finish on the podium, so I'm just going to lock down the climber's jersey. So I think it could be really competitive down to the bitter end, because there's like 12 guys in the race that could win it.
Right. So that will be kind of cool. I could see someone like, Shackman going for that kind of thing. So here's kind of the breakdown from Pro Cycling Stats. You say, hey, top GC riders, and they give a breakdown, and that is all on points. So it's interesting that Pogacar comes out on top. And whereas we can just kind of use this as a thing, but what kind of I want to mention real quick here, some of the riders I'm seeing, Chavez as an example, Adam Yates as an example. Mitchelton Scott's basically said, we're coming in, we're not even going for GC. We're coming in strictly for stages only. What do you think of Mitchelton Scott and their reasoning for that? I mean, one is it Adam is going to Ineos next year and Simon is, I think, staying. I think that's what it is.
Yes, I believe that's what it is. And I think they don't really have a choice. I mean, there's a lot of work and a lot of resources that go into the Tour de France. And I think at some point you do have to choose what you're going to do. And I think if you don't have a realistic shot at winning the GC or being on the podium, then I think you have to go to first stage wins. And I think it's actually better for the riders if you come out right away and just say, listen, we're going for stage wins. Yeah, you guys have a ton of freedom. You guys can race every single day. You can, if you need a day to go in the Gruppetto, you can do that. But at the end of the day, if you just let those guys know what the plan is right away, that way they can wrap their head around it and they can be ready to go. And I think you end up being more successful that way. And that was what Columbia used to do. High Road used to do that. They would come out and just say, hey, listen, we're going for stage wins. And they would always be really successful doing that.
Yeah, right. So what's interesting about the way that they categorize this here on this page is Bernal's down at 25th. So obviously not going. So let's walk through some of the main GC guys and who you think is going to end up coming out. I mean, we kind of mentioned those already, but let's start with the defending champ. Egan Bernal. He's obviously got a very good team with him. And I don't think if Froome and Thomas were like in form what they used to be, it would be more detrimental. And maybe it's better that they don't have all this confusion there. What do you think his chances are of a repeat?
I think it's very high. I think for sure he's got a podium. Probably does not finish out of the top two.
Right. So that final time trial, who do you think? I mean, I think it doesn't hurt him. He's a decent time trialer. I think if everyone's in their peak, that one goes the edge to like a Roglic who can just flat out time trial and then flat out climb, or maybe even like a Dumoulin. But Bernal's not bad at what that job is either. So
I think he's going to be right there. I think he's going to be right there for sure.
Pogacar, you mentioned you figured him on the top. What do you think? He was so impressive to me coming out the last week of the Vuelta last year. The only one really able to push and to have put any pressure on Roglic. He was ended up dropping Lopez as an example. What do you think his options or his outlook is for this?
So this is going to be very interesting because he and Roglic are from the same country. They have, I mean, Roglic has shown that he's willing to let Pogacar win stages as long as it doesn't affect his GC, like his winning the race. Yeah. So what I see Pogacar going into some of these mountain stages at the end when it's down to the bitter end and where you have only 3 or 4 guys left. And I see him putting a lot of pressure on these guys that also want a podium spot because they're going to have to, if they chase Pogacar, that means that they're going to pull Roglic. And then the way Roglic is going, assuming that he's in the race, he's probably going to go over the top of him anyway. So I see Pogacar like chipping away and ending up on the podium, almost for sure.
Yeah, he's an impressive one coming up as well. So Roglic, you just mentioned him. Obviously, a very strong team. I think it was exceptional to watch in Burgos when George Bennett was trying to do well, and how well Sepp Kuss was. There was a day there where he just sat up, and you're like, I think he can win this. And then his performance in the Dauphiné was over the top. It was so impressive. You've got Wout on the front, you've got Dumoulin, you've got Kruijswijk and Roglic, and they're waiting for this little American to be the last guy in that chain. It was pretty impressive, for support. What do you think Roglic's chance are here? Assuming 1, that he's healthy, and then 2, I don't know if you know anything about his health about that.
I don't. The only update is that they say it's 50-50. I think if he comes to the tour, and he's in even remotely decent form, I think he's the favorite. Because he's got, not because he himself is the favorite, but because he's got the strongest team. And I think he's a guaranteed podium spot.
So question on that. There's been a lot of things written that he's just coming in too hot for the tour. Look how he failed in the Giro last year. And my take on that is that once again, this is only 2 weeks into the before the tour. Second is he really hasn't raced. I don't think he raced before the lockdown. So coming out of that, in last year before the Giro, he'd raced a ton. What do you think his pre-form coming in? Is there anything to read into that? Like too much, too soon? Someone's going to ride themselves in. What is your idea of as a coach being just 2 weeks before the tour and how these guys are, or is it already the plan's already set in motion?
No, I think this guy is so talented and so strong that I think he's gonna be fine. I mean, if it was the Dauphiné of old and he was doing that and there was 4 weeks out, I'd be like, maybe he's not going to be so good in week 3. But the way that it played out this year, I think he did the work he needed to do over the lockdown. And I think he's literally the strongest guy, like physically the strongest guy in the bike race. And I just think the way he rides and with the team that he has. So again, you look at Ineos, and Bernal has South American riders with him. So those riders, they ride a certain style, right? So Roglic, he has the exact same thing at Jumbo-Visma. He has a bunch of riders there that ride the same style. Like they ride bigger gears. Sepp is the only one that's kind of the outlier.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they have a bunch of guys there that ride really big gears, and they're not twitchy. They don't accelerate really fast. You got like Dumoulin, that guy, you've seen it in the past. The guy rides this really high, very steady tempo, and that's what Roglic needs. And I think he's just got a team that's loaded with those kind of guys. So I think for him, it just works. Things are just lining up just really, really well.
I think it was maybe stage 3. It was one of those on the Dauphiné where you're right. Someone would be attacking. Even Bernal had been attacking, and Sepp was, he's so springy. He's able to just jump up to them and then kind of allow Roglic to get to him. It was a different, sometimes I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe you can say, cause you like the slower stuff, but in one aspect, it was Sepp making sure that this move is not getting away without our guy either. So that's right. It's always good to maybe have that combo in there.
The thing you got to remember about Sepp is, Sepp, most people don't know this. Sepp comes from a family of endurance athletes. His dad is one of the best ski coaches in the world, Nordic coaches. So this guy has been around endurance athletics his entire life. So he understands the different, I'm trying to explain it. Like he understands the different dynamics of endurance athletes, and he's very coachable. I mean, his dad's a coach.
Yeah.
Like he's a very coachable kid. He's on a team that's loaded with really experienced guys. I'm almost assured that Sepp is in those team meetings and his ears are wide open, and they're saying, we need you to do this and this and this, and that is what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. And so when you have, yes, his skill set is just slightly different, but at the end of the day, of almost every guy in the bike race, he's probably one of the most coachable guys out there. So for me, that's what makes the difference.
That's cool.
He's not afraid to listen, and he understands the value of knowledge. He understands the value of knowledge.
So with that's just, and then we'll go to the next thing about it. What I was impressed with Roglic last year, goes into the Giro, had some problems, really had a team that got decimated. I think Hessing didn't make it. There was another, Laurens Duplu ended up getting sick right away. Sepp wasn't the Sepp we know, but then he goes to the Vuelta and just changes everything. And it's a learning process. And when you can see that, much like Bernal, I mean, some of these younger guys, their ability to adapt has been pretty impressive. Speaking of young guys adapting, you've got 2 here, Sergio Higuita, Danny Martinez for EF Education First, but they also have Rigoberto Urán. What do you think that dynamic for that team, and who's going to be that leader and what their prospects are?
Well, I think we said this earlier. I think that combo of guys is really, really effective. So you've got Rigoberto, who's the veteran guy. You've got 2 younger guys who may in fact be stronger than him. It's hard to say, but again, I think these guys have learned, and I think these guys have learned that Rigoberto has the knowledge that they need to be successful. They seem to be on the same page, and that I think is going to be key. So I think you're going to get to a point where somewhere in this tour, you're going to see those three EF Education Colombian guys together. And I mean, listen, they're Colombian. They're going to look out for each other. And at the end of the day, I think that combo can be really, really dangerous from every aspect. I mean, even if they ended up in the jersey, I mean, that wouldn't be a horrible thing. I think they would be. I think they really would be okay. I think they would be okay to go all the way to the finish that way.
Do you think Tom Dumoulin has a shot this year, or is he going to be resigned to team duties?
No, this is the thing about Dumoulin. I think he's playing it the way he wants to play it. I think there's not okay, he's listed as a team leader, but let's be honest. We know that Roglic is the team leader. So at the end of the day, I think for Dumoulin, it's good that he doesn't have all the press in his face. I think it's good that he's the guy that maybe he's calling the shots behind the scene, although there's no guarantee, but maybe. But I think ultimately this is a good scenario for him because he's not going to be asked the tough questions every single day. And if he has a bad day, people are just going to be like, oh, well, they're going to move on from it. They're not going to grill him on it. They're not going to put it in his face. And I think he's in a really good scenario here. It's just another layer of why I think Jumbo Visma is the team to beat.
I fully agree. You want to take a swipe at who your top 2, 3, 1 is? If I'll do mine first, if you won't mind. Roglic, I think he's going to win it. I think Pogacar is actually going to come in second with Bernal third, and I think you're going to get a Martin somewhere up there in 5th place. And Danny Martinez is my thought for one of those top 5 as well. Iran doesn't seem to be, you just can't ride yourself in. You should have been closer up in the Dauphiné. And then 6th place is going to be Richie Porte, always knocking, never quite there.
Okay, so I'm going to go, assuming he's going to do it, I'm going Roglic, I'm going Bernal. I'm actually going to go with Pinot because I think he's going to want it so bad. He's going to literally ride himself into the grave. That's a horrible way to say it, but
no, I understand.
I think he's going to ride himself until he just can't ride anymore. And then I think you're going to see one of the EF guys up there. I do think it's going to probably be either Higuita or it's going to be Martinez. My choice is probably of those two guys, it's going to be Higuita. I think Higuita is a little more experienced. He's a little more developed. And ultimately, I really do think that those 3 Colombian guys are going to work together to make it happen.
He won the Tour of Colombia. I think Higuita did with, I think Hernandez was second, but he got hurt in the Dauphiné. I don't know how much he's going to be affected. A lot of these guys, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I think that's a great pick. So we're both going with Roglic. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I think so. All right.
Any other last comments before we put this out and then everyone can enjoy the tour coming up? Any last comments about what you want to see about the tour or anything? So I'm going to have the video you sent me, the Col de Loz. Is that what it is? Yeah,
Col de Loz.
Okay, which you mentioned, and I will put it out at some point before the tour, mention it, and it's maybe I'll put it out, maybe have to fast speed it a little bit because it's like 40 minutes of driving in a car. I don't want people to get sick. Any last tour comments?
I just think it's going to be a really good tour. I mean, I think that we've especially in this area, we've been dealing with a lot of negative things. And I think that that sports in its current form and fashion has actually been really enjoyable. I'm not saying that cycling should go to this full time because it's a really difficult, very stressful scenario. But at the end of the day, it's very exciting. And I think the tour is going to be very exciting. And I think that I literally think that almost every day there's going to be some kind of high drama, whether it's a guy gets sick, he gets a COVID positive test, he crashes, or he has a really successful day. Those are all negative things. But I think that some guys are gonna find lightning in a bottle, and they're just gonna ride that wave. And guys like that, it could be really dangerous because if a guy is just flying and he gets some confidence and it's all compact, I mean, it's going to be incredible. I think it's going to be really, really good tour.
Right. And we've all been waiting for it. So like you said earlier, the cycling is so compact right now. There's racing every day. What's the best part about it though, is you're not watching a race where you're like, oh, just some bunch of, third string guys. I mean, top guys are riding because they're all ready to go. And so it's just been a slugfest. And it's great. Hey, anybody you've got coming up on your interviews from the Gruppetto? I'm assuming you're still doing your podcast.
Yeah, I've taken a little break. I'm trying to dial a few things in. Nobody on tap right now, but I'm gonna try to share this through that so we can get some people out there. But yeah, I'm working on a few things. I'm reorganizing a little bit, but it's been busy. I mean, in a weird way, it's been busy, I think, for everybody. Just trying to you have kids, I have a kid, and everybody with kids out there. I just want to say God bless you.
Right. Yes, we've got one new freshman and he's having trouble. I'll just say that.
Yeah, well, I have a 13-year-old that's in 8th grade. So for all those people out there that have teenagers or preteens, I feel your pain.
Right. Well, get him into the tour maybe, and they can start watching that. So,
yeah,
hey, Mike, thank you very much. Episode 190. Yeah, I will send you the audio. You can share it on your side without all this production here that we normally have. So, I appreciate it. Thank you, and be well, and we'll see you out on the road.
Okay, cool, man. Thanks.
Thanks.
Oh my God, David. Whew, dude, please. Give me a fucking break, man.